just coming from, so that we don't project that to the next election, and some of very critical restructuring that we need to do from our institutions, from the electoral system itself as well, and from the brand of politics that now we are being ushered into as a country. Before we took a short break, we were with you, Professor Getele. Hope you've not lost your track of thought.
The point I was making is Jubilee are different for one particular reason. They absorbed the parliament. Jubilee and the Nation captured the parliament. So we can argue without fear of contradiction that for the 10 years of Jubilee and the Nation, we are no parliament. Now, how do you know that? There is nothing that came from the executive that never passed through that parliament. So that's why I said now Ruto, if he's going to serve us and become another Kibaki, or better than Kibaki, you will have to be careful with the state capture, with the capturing of the institutions. So we need to resist the temptation of absorbing the opposition into his administration. Because once that is done, then his policies will not be enriched by the debate and by the knowledge that come from the opposition. Because the opposition always come with the counter proposals on how to make things better. So the beginning of absorbing these people who are already been in the opposition is not a good sign. It's a sign that he can early start to avoid. So number two, I think whatever we say, that we will never, I think I will agree with you, with the Nigerian thing you gave, that most of us will say that Raila Odinga will be the best president that we never had. Now, problem though is you need to be consistent. You have to remember Abraham Lincoln, the man who liberated the black people in America. He ran, was it 9 times for 36, he spent 36 years because he ran for that election 9 times on one message. You can't have a country have free and have slave. Eventually won. And the first thing he did was proclamation, freeing the slaves. He believed in his message. Okay? So lack of consistency also on Raila's message may very well also have cost him the election. You see, there is at one time I wrote something on social media, and I was blasted by Azimio people. Because I said Azimio cannot make Ruto their message. People are not interested. They needed a message.
What is the message of Azimio?
They need, yes, they cannot make Ruto their message. They make Ruto their message, they will lose the election. I was blasted. Some of them I went into my wall removing them because of the way they viciously attacked me. So he needed to...
You are affected by that.
Yes.
Actually, 80% of their message was about Ruto.
Was about Ruto.
Yeah.
So they
and the moment you make the opponent your message, then you have no message. Because the election is about to hope. You see, Ruto has given the people hope. Hope that there will be a better tomorrow. Hope that the hustlers will rise. And that hope is also dangerous if it is not achieved. Because they're going to create a revolutionary atmosphere. Or depress people so much that they even cease to participate in the political affairs of the country. He has lifted this country, created hope. Hope in an election is what people sell.
Thank you.
That's what they seek.
Thank you, thank you. Professor Mutabi, you know, also we're not really discussing where most Kenyans are coming from, and some of the bugbears and fears and trepidation that they have with Dr. William Ruto's presidency.
Right.
That they're saying, you know, even right now as you're talking about all these people who are crossing over to his side, that is being sort of really emboldened. There won't be any checks and balances from the other side. How we creating, so to speak, that we have an imperial presidency, that under Ruto, you know, he has good attributes, he's got good talents, such a very fluent orator. He's a garden of energy, you know, he's told us he's a hard worker, he spends sleepless nights planning, he's very focused. He could deliver this country to that canon that, you know, Raila Odinga has been talking about at the end of the day. But on the other side, even as the country prospers, are we, and he's young at the end of the day. So when he retires, where will he go? That is, what would we do with William Ruto? Just as the question you asked, what do we do with Raila Odinga at the end of the day? And this is in most people that you know, you can hear, yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's very strategic, but once he clutches his power, will he hand over? This is where people are actually asking, will he hand over?
That's a good question.
Yeah, is he gracious enough to hand over? Or will we see the constitution also, just as we've learned from, you know, this particular region as well, being tinkered with to extend term limits at the end of the day? These are questions people are not really broaching. They don't want to ask. But working he will do. But will he hand over? That's the question. Yeah,
that's a good point. That's a good point. And it will be the test of the democratic mantle of a president-elect, Dr. William Ruto, in terms of how he handles democracy, how he mobilizes, galvanizes his support, and so on. And that's the reason why I slightly differ with the Professor Ntuli's take that reaching out to get people to join his party is different from what Moi did in 92, 97, where after elections, people are told to defect from their parties and then they're elected under Kanu. What Kibaki did and what I think Ruto is doing is that you remain in your party, but in terms of party politics on the parliamentary floor, you vote with us. He reached out to Wiper in 2008, just after the post-election violence, and Kalonzo Musyoka became his deputy. He became his vice president. It was predicated on getting Wiper support in parliament. He reached out many other parties during the parliamentary processes on the floor, so that you don't have to cross from your political party, but you can affiliate with us in terms of voting on the floor. And I think this is what's taking place right now. This is very, very important for cementing important decisions in parliament. That's why the first activity for this Azimio and the Kenya Kwanza is election of speakers of parliament and the Senate. That's likely the next battleground for the two movements, or the two coalitions. Whoever determines the speaker of the parliament and the Senate is a very, very important purveyor of democracy in this country. Because in the parliament, there'll be motions, very important motions discussed in the parliament for passing resources, especially budgetary discussions and so on. There'll be important motions in terms of policy shifts and adjustments that the president wants to make. There'll also be Senate responsible for monitoring the devolved units. And there are likely to be motions coming up in some of those areas as a result of motions of no confidence. If a vote of no confidence takes place in the counties, this will be resolved in Nairobi at the Senate level. So whoever takes charge of Parliament, National Assembly, and the Senate is a very, very important activity. And that's why that now we have seen in today's papers is the next shift. This is, I think, coming week because of the elections for both houses. The other element why reaching out is very important for President-elect William Ruto is that you want to be seen to have a mandate. And this mandate must be bigger and wider than just leaning on the Kenya Kwanza mandate in Parliament and so on, and the county assemblies, is to have a bigger mandate in order to have at least a sellable support in those areas. Because if you find in Parliament, I see Azimio as large numbers. Look at even the county assembly of Nairobi. Azimio has a very, very... So you need to reach out to those areas, those political parties that can work with you in order to make... Because last time we saw, towards the tail end of Jubilee administration, there's a lot of division in Parliament, for example, because of these Tanga and the Kieleweke groups when they merged and so on. It really brought in the issue of the handshake. It was predicated on actually having Jubilee motions passed in Parliament. So I'll not take for granted reaching out to these interested groups and so on. But what we need to guard is democracy. That we don't want to see a situation emerging like the Kanu era, when everybody now crosses over to Kenya Kwanza. That's also dangerous, I think. But I liked your guest last time. I think it was Malim and others who said that actually this cannot happen because the current arrangement in the 2010 Constitution allows resources to come to all areas, regardless of the political affiliation that you have. County governments will still receive resources from the national government, allocation and so on, so CDF and so on. All these areas will still receive funds, so regardless of your political affiliation. So that's a safeguard for our democracy. But I wanted to also point out that this crossing over should not be seen as problematic, because crossing over in Kenya politics has been there. As I said, every election since 1997 has been different political parties. And the coalition building to me in Kenya is a very, very important enterprise. Why? Because it brings in like-minded people together. Unlike the dictatorship of a single movement, a party, where if you don't support the ideas of the party leader, then you are marginalized and expelled. We don't have expulsions because there are opportunities for other parties as well as also to become independent and so on. So to me, that's good for democracy. And I'll not fault negotiations.
Thank you.
To work together and so on. Just finally, I want to finish out on a very, very important point. The checks and balances that you have in the country right now, checks and balances in the parliament, checks and balances at county level, will not allow the emergence of a monolithic dictatorship that we saw in the previous years. Safeguards in the 2010 constitution allow that to happen, because if we go back to the monolithic Kano days, then but I don't think there's a possibility for that in the current arrangement that you have.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
You can see I'm smiling.
What's behind the smile?
I'm smiling because I disagree with Professor Mutabe. I luckily agree with Professor, and I want to make several points. I think the question that you raised about, so what will President William do? I think for me, just took very quick answers. First, the fruit, the taste of the pudding is in the eating.
Indeed.
I think it is unfair to judge President William Ruto before he's president. I think let us give President William Ruto the opportunity to be president for the next 5 years and to be able to take this country to the next level. I think that's the first statement. The second one, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance.
Yeah, exactly.
So we must ensure that the process of holding the president to account continues. And that's where two things for me come in. That's why I was disagreeing with Professor Mutabi and agreeing with Prof. That number one, the reality is over the last 10 years, Parliament has been a disappointment. That's the reality. And I think the greatest challenge for the president, and Professor Natili was right, the greatest challenge for the president, and he's made that statement, the question is how it will be actualized, is how do you ensure that the institutions that are supposed to hold people accountable work? If Raila Odinga retires, it is the one thing that the country will have to replace or miss.
Exactly.
Where is the credible voice that is willing to hold government to account? I think it's Oliver who was saying, I hope Raila continues to hold government to account. But there are also other people who are saying that the old man is tired. You keep thinking that he's the only one who must hold government to account. Was it the one who was born to be the opposition? Let somebody else also hold government to account. And I think that's going to be the challenge of this country. The challenge, and I think there are two things we need to focus on. Number one, we must stop trusting individuals. We must trust institutions. So that means that the kind of reforms that we focus on are reforms that strengthen all our institutions of governance as opposed to making them weak. Reforms that ensure that those institutions are composed of people based on competence, not connections. Because the moment if we continue being connections, those institutions will be weak. I say that I disagree with Professor Mutabi a little bit, because for me I think there's no difference between the defections in 1992 and the defections of 2022.
Yeah.
If they are focused on what's good for me, because the practical reality is that you might end up having a situation where there's nobody in the opposition. So I think part of our, and that's why you heard me talk about the electoral system, part of our focus on reforms must be how do we make it two things. One, how do we make it possible for bipartisanship to happen without people thinking I must cross for it to happen? Because if you don't make that possible, then you might end up having a situation where you have an election today. After election, nobody likes losing. Then you look and say, this is the losing side. I will go to the winning side. Then you will soon start complaining. So who is it who is holding government to account? And then you hear the people who have been doing it saying, you think we're the only ones who will do it for the country. The country must do it for itself. The second thing related to that, we must strengthen our political parties. Our political parties must stop becoming vehicles for achieving elections, where you go in to an election, then after the election it dies. If you look at the history of this country and political parties, look at how Kanu has performed in this election, going So
Jubilee is also basically
Jubilee is gone. So if all the old parties are going, so every election we are creating new ones.
But that's a bit the beauty of it. Even as we're losing these parties and joining one coalition, I think the country is gravitating towards a place where we'll be having Azimio and the Kenya Kwanza.
My problem, Dibal,
yes.
we have said that for 15 years. We'll be gravitating towards. Unfortunately, every electoral cycle, we create new coalitions and new parties. So for me, I have no problem with the gravitation. If you go to the, I think we talk about the U.S. democracy, despite it being perfection, the Republican and Democrats are always there. Go to UK, we always have, for us,
and the Labour Party.
I don't care what the names are called, but I think our politics must mature so we start having a situation where we have strong parties so we can be competing on ideas and we can be moving in and out. Because the reality, if you look at from citizens have done their bit. From a citizen perspective, you have two strong coalitions. But the reality is that those coalitions are not based on ideology. They do not stand. In a short while, you will find everybody has moved here. Tomorrow, if the other person wins, they will move the other side. I think that's a danger for democracy, because then it is not institutional. It is based on the now, it's based on my access to the power. And that's my fear.
And I think that's a problem, because we have African politics are played along ethnic lines.
I'm sorry, but could I just say, listen from Dr. Oliver, then we'll come back to you.
Okay.
I mean, to develop the thought of Prof. Odote, I think we are at the point where we are now shifting towards ideology.
Right.
In its very raw format, we can say the capitalists versus the socialists were actually partly in this election. Here you have an agenda where you are saying for every person that is not involved in the socio-economic space, 6,000 shillings per month.
Right.
You are not telling us where it will come from.
Right.
And the explanation is that once we heal corruption, we will get enough money to be able. So the sense you give an individual is that I really don't have to wake up and work very hard. There will be a 6,000 coming. A good safety net, perhaps.
Yep.
But on the one hand, it's a socialist approach towards life. On the other side, you have the capitalist approach where wake up, work hard, you will benefit. So in terms of ideology, I think we can say we are beginning to see the emergence of this. Perhaps what it needs to be done is nurturing. But I like what we are saying about institutions. For me, personally, I actually commend the IBC of Wafula Chebukati. Frankly, mistakes were made in the previous election. The Supreme Court responded to those issues and outlined and clarified issues. In this election, the IEBC followed those things almost to the letter. To the letter. And in fact, the election this time was verifiable. It was much more verifiable than that one which Maraga said the process was questionable. Now, I saw as if the president is a little stuck in the process. What he didn't realize, perhaps, is that the process was worked on this time. And that even the 4 commissioners who broke ranks with the 3, they were saying in the 11th and a half hour, something happened. So they were not saying the process was not good. It was in that hour that they differed. So institutionally, I think you can say IEBC has gone a notch higher. We hopefully can get other leaders who can actually now perfect it. That would be my prayer. In terms of the judiciary in this country is settling down and is beginning to show a consistent pattern of independence and capacity to make decisions against whoever or for whoever when they feel that that is right. And I think we must significantly commend the judiciary for the work they have done. When he was talking about Raila's easy trust, every time I see Raila's lawyers telling the people, this one we have already won, I get very, very worried. Because I just realize they are not even giving you the impression that they are putting in the kind of significant effort required to be able to to do these things. The simple questions being asked by those judges in very soft voices were very tough questions. An electronic transmission is happening. You are saying somebody was sitting somewhere, able to go into the air, pick the forms, bring them down, and then put them back. What about the ones which came by road? Can the two be juxtaposed? So they were asking significant questions, and I realized the lawyers, if you see Kamango there, you run with it. You say, this is wrong. If you see a number there, you say it's wrong. You have not even checked the other numbers.
Yeah.
So I just felt like, I thank God for all the lawyers that were involved. They helped us learn a lot. But I think there was a sense in which it needed to have gone a step higher. But my commendation is to the judiciary. Because going forward, even the average politician will fear the judgment of the judiciary. There is at least one politician who was banned from running by the judiciary on account of integrity and values, isn't it? So people begin to interpret this. No, this institution is not an idle institution. So I agree that institutions, and then the question of the equality of Kenyans, so that then we are moving away from kingpins and beginning to work through institutions. The next task for me is for the citizens to now go a notch higher. You see, citizens have now shifted from throwing stones at each other, but they now need to be the primary accountability demanders. The citizens, like now, Boris Johnson, had to step down for holding a party.
Against his own regulations.
Yes. And the system has changed. And when he was looking like he wants to stay, hey, the citizens began to say, wait a minute, he's not representing my interests.
Yes.
So we need to get to the point where the citizen realize it's not just not fighting one another, we can actually recall an MP. The Constitution allows us to recall an MP. We can actually recall a governor.
They can assert themselves.
Yes, we can assert ourselves.
Yes.
And I think to me that is the next level. And then the question of...
In fact, you're talking about that, and I'm seeing this end of a party from the Independent newspaper, and you can see where Boris has been dropped. So Director might just pick up this so that we can see it. The end of the party, it says, Andrew, look at what's next for the departing Prime Minister. There on the screen. To a fancy a comeback and the divided Conservatives that he's leaving behind. He's in the trash can.
Liz Truss is taking over.
Yes.
Then now Parliament, which we have talked about here, I think this sense of patronage, where you struggle hard to get into ODM because you know the name of Raila is powerful, and once you have crossed over into ODM with questionable methodology, we question the IEBC for fairness. We don't question the parties. How did this person become a nominated person for ODM? They will crook, they will hook, they will do whatever it can, as long as he gets that nomination in Raila's stronghold.
Thank you.
Things are finished. Then they come to Parliament and they are unable to discharge. And I think people now need to begin questioning. That was the revolt of the independent candidate. This is the one we wanted. The party put in this one. We have chosen the one we wanted. When this person gets to Parliament, let them assert themselves and do the work of legislation.
Thank you. Even as I think I can see we're remaining with a few minutes, and I need to release you so that also Collins Odote, I had to shoehorn him to be here. He's in another meeting that he should be at around this time, so we should be winding up. The question of it has exposed IBC somewhat. The question of corporate governance, I think, as you mentioned, and you hail also IBC, the court took cognizance of the fact that there are issues within IBC when it comes to corporate governance, not just that institution, but across the institutions that we have in this country. Could you just briefly speak on it as we're winding up? I'm remaining with only 5 minutes.
I think I'll do that with a critique to the Jubilee administration against the Kibaki. Kibaki stuck
in a minute.
Yes.
Yeah. In a minute.
Kibaki was very serious in the implementation of Article 232 in terms of cooperating governance.
Yes.
Jubilee departed from that by placing very weak people in institutions, by doing a pre-selection, like Professor Tapia was saying.
Yeah.
So cooperating governance is very important. It needs to be emphasized, and they need to take serious cognizance of Article 232 in order to make merit and competence the only criteria for appointment and promotion.
Thank you.
Well said.
The question of the qualification also of the vice chair was, or the other commissioners, because it has been exposed that it is only Chebukati who can be or has a qualification of a Supreme Court judge in that particular panel. I think that is an issue also that we should be, it should be looked into, so that we're not really like subjected into a constitutional crisis in any event when he resigns, or perhaps
or
dies. What really happens?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think I buy the argument by some political observers who say that one of the conditions at IPC commission recruitment should be at least 2 commissioners
who can be judges of
the High Court. That at least 2 of them should hold credentials to be High Court, so that there's an alternative. There's a Chebukati and there's somebody else. I think if they revise the act for the IBC selection, I think that will help to preempt that particular scenario and so on.
It's not reviving the act.
So even you, Gitile, I know you were running to be a commissioner there.
Yes.
So it's a high time now you go back to law school.
No, it's 7 commissioners.
7
commissioners.
Yes.
So 5 can hold a...
Now we can admit
so during the recruitment,
but if you want to be the chair, maybe next time.
During recruitment, they need to balance scales.
Right, so that at least there's
scales. But you see what they did there, if you look at it very carefully, is that they reward and lot and connection. They didn't bother to plan for the institution in the future. So they didn't bother to put that into perspective.
Yeah, just finish your point.
So as I was saying, is that as we wound up, of course, this discussion, is that Kenyan politics are not played along ideology. We are a long way from there, but I know we are heading there. Like the Labour and Conservatives in America, in Britain, Democrats and Conservatives and Republicans in America. But I want to just point out that we cannot run away from the role of kingpins, opinion leaders in Africa, because of ethnicity in which our policies are entrenched. But I'm happy to see that we are now trying to get out of that. I agree with Dr. Kisaka's point that we're getting out of that to create at least a new semblance of democracy in our own way, because democracy cannot be replicated in Africa the way it's played out there. Then lastly, I just wanted to add that the trust we have in our institutions needs to build up. We need to build that up, and that's why, as I end, I will ask that the country moves into the mode of healing and reconciliation for us to begin now to develop here.
Thank you. Professor Collins Odote.
I think 2 things. First, in terms of the reforms that are required, I think as we think about the reforms of the institutions, it's important to recognize, I think it's Oliver who said, it's important to recognize the context within which IEBC and the judiciary operates. It is very easy to blame the individuals who are there. It's very easy. But we must recognize that they work under very difficult circumstances. The problem is not them. The problem is us. If you go to the qualifications, before the current Chebukati Commission, we had 2 commissions, IIC and IBC, all led by Ahmed Isaac. In both of them, there was more than 1 lawyer. When we came to 2016, there was a debate about, no, these lawyers are the problem, let's reduce them. So in fact, there was a deliberate intention, let's get only 1 lawyer. We don't even need them. There's even people saying, let's not get... I think this...
I'm coming over there.
For me, the bigger problem is not whether somebody is a lawyer or an accountant or an engineer. The bigger problem is going to the question about, do we ensure we have a selection process for all our institutions that focuses on competence, integrity, qualifications, not technical know-how. That's and it's not a problem of those who are taken there. It's a problem of the process by which we take people there. That's what we need to fix. If we fix that, we are done.
We're done. We leave it at that.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment.
Yes.
All people in a position to choose people into whatever position. Please remember that if you choose people who favor you, you will be in a position where you will need to be favored, and they will not be there for you. So choose people who can protect you at your weakest.
Thank you.
Protect the nation, protect you. Otherwise, institutions will not survive.
Thank you. Thank you. As a good pause giver, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate your input this morning. Even as we're winding up, it's 8:30. I just want to run you by the editorial cartoons that we have today quickly. This is what you expect today in the Standard. Hua, hua, hua. Please tell him to hold it together. He has a country to run now. This is what Garo has drawn in the Standard today. You can see there, he's personified there, the president-elect, and the posy of goons behind him. This is what is in the People Daily today, according to Stano. A lot of promises, time to work. Congratulations, the ball is now in your court. And this is what also Zona's drawn in the Star today, upheld. That was the ruling yesterday. And yeah, the business also has ticked up since that upholding of his victory yesterday. Thank you for your valued company. We'll do this tomorrow. And thank